Hello there, everyone. This is I Am Mark III coming to you with, well, a bit of content that we've not had in quite some time, have we? Yes, we are coming to you with some From the Depths content. And today I would like to talk about the Phorcys. I'm fairly sure it's a battlecruiser, but it is alternatively being called a cathedral, a floating example of block spam, and an abomination by various sources. For those that aren't following what's happened on Discord or aren't watching Damadoc's channel, this is an entry for his steaming pile of ship tournament, and it's also why there's been a lack of content over the last few weeks in general, because I found a lot of my time being sucked up into this thing, and even then it didn't get finished, so there are rough edges. It's not been painted as a particular note, so that's why it's all well, almost entirely colourless, the only example really being the cathedral windows that have been painted in any kind of colour. And there's rough edges and features that were missed that I planned and all that stuff. So that is kind of the purpose of this video. I want to actually do something with it and explain the ideas and principles behind its creation. And yeah, we're just going to see how this goes, really. So, what is the Phorcys? It was built for the Steam Pile of Ship tournament, as I said, and that posed some restrictions on weaponry and capabilities, but it also presented some options. I mean, the first standout example really is that this is a paddle-based vehicle, because I decided to do that thinking it would be like a rare thing, so I want to experiment. It's also primarily rocket-armed, so it's got a cluster of pots at the back here, and some more systems at the front. Yes, the cram cannons are big and shiny, but they actually contribute a lot less firepower than you'd think compared to these really small missile pods, so yeah. There's also, as a note, some hidden missile pods in the chimneys, and there's also a torpedo launcher situated in the underside section down here. And last but not least, there is a battery of secondaries, like casemate cannons. Sadly, I had to strip out a bunch of those due to budget limits. But anyway, I digress. Oh, also, puny little pew-pew anti-aircraft guns. Not very strong, but they've got the fastest travel speed of any shots on the ship. So that's why they're in that job. But they're just so cheap. I don't really care if they get shot off, if I'm going to be honest. The ship doesn't care. Why should I? Oh yeah, and there's a missile pod on top. Don't worry. I will cover these things in more detail as we go, but I figured I'd start with a general overview of the ship, and then I would go section by section, going over the different areas of the ship, just to make sure that I cover everything in my general thoughts. So, the Phorcys. This is following a steampunk kind of style, that's why it's got lots of industrial bits, it's got the arches, it's got the odd shaping, it's got the off-centered and decorated crams on the front. I mean, there's even a little control room in the front of this one here. But yeah, that kind of thing. But it's not the more prevalent concept of steampunk, which is like, sure, steam powered, but it's all shiny metal, it's all modern day kind of things. Like, what if modern day was based on steam technology? That's what most people think of when they think of steampunk. No, this is the other kind. This is Victorian era steampunk. Surprisingly advanced for the time, but also made in definite Victorian styles, using some Victorian limits, you know, that kind of thing. So that's why it's so wooden. Not because I'm a cheap bugger, just made the entire thing out of wood pieces. That was because of budget. It was meant to be mostly reinforced wood. Thank you very much. But no, it's just wood. In concept, the Phorcys is more of a exploration style vessel than an outright combatant. It is intended to be wandering the seas, exploring, studying, learning, but also functioning as kind of a salvage craft as well. One of the intended features was going to be like decorative cranes around the place, some including hidden weapons, some not, but that would have been like ways for the design to access flotsam and jetsam, or salvage, or to latch on to wondrous creatures of the deeps. Maybe this thing would have hunted the Kraken, who knows. But in that end, it also had a aircraft to help with scouting over longer distances, but it was the design was intended to be able to work with a submersible as well, so, you know, undersea access to the docking section, which I will go over in a little bit. But yeah, so we'll continue from here though. That's also why there's like big interior spaces, especially this rear section here. This was going to be like the workshop slash foundry slash production area. It's also why the smokestacks are on top of it. But anyway, continuing on. As far as the tournament slash design philosophy goes now, since that is the basic concept of the vessel, the name Phorcys is highly relevant. It was picked after I worked out the general concept of what I was going to try and do with this ship, because Phorcys comes from Greek mythology and is the primordial god of the seas, or I should more accurately say, the Greek god of sea dangers, or the terrors of the depths in some interpretations. And I interpreted that into the name in the following way. The Phorcys is a unstoppable, primordial terror. It will come for you. Slowly but surely it will come to you. And when it gets its hooks into you, it'll drag you down into the darkness of the depths of the ocean. And it was only semi-planned this way because, you know, I got the concept, I picked the name out, then I went on to fully develop the thing. But it actually kind of applies to the ship's design philosophy as a whole. This thing is... it can absorb a lot of damage before it actually gets knocked out. Like, during combat testing, it was down to almost 40% hull integrity, and it was still floating, it was still alive, and it was still firing back. So, pretty darn hard to completely knock it out unless you get a lucky hit. And that is actually the weakness of this design. If you can land decisive strikes on it early on in the fights, then you can mitigate a lot of damage to yourself, and you can basically stop the Phorcys cold, especially after I had to reduce the number of AIs in it by the request of the tournament organizer. But if you can't do that, it'll have more time to pile on the damage. The crams will keep firing, the missile pods will be peppering you with many, many little presents of explosive or kinetic design. The longer you are fighting this thing, the worse state you're going to be in, and the more likely your weapons and systems are going to be disabled, because this thing is a shredder by nature. It lacks a big knockout punch, it lacks the ability to just like blow a massive hole in the side of your ship, but it will saturate the hell out of your ship and very quickly cripple turrets, cripple detection, cripple anything that's got any kind of exposed weakness in the surface area. And it has got the power to chew through armor, it needs a little time to do so. So if you don't give it that time, then that is how you defeat the Phorcys. Cripple it as fast as you can. It's surprisingly comparable, honestly, to the other designs in the tournament, and in all honesty, it is built on the old design principle of like building bigger, building larger ships. So that's part of why it's called a bit of block spam. But since From the Depths removed accurate targeting mechanisms from the game, a fair few versions ago now, but that has actually allowed a design like this to be viable compared to more conventional metal holds, heavy cannon-based ships. So I'm curious to see how it's going to fare regarding the tournament. And I feel like I've waffled on for a long time about the basic design philosophy of this vessel. So, right, let us begin with the actual sectioning. No, I've just changed my mind. I will actually mention a few things first. There are some weapon systems that were intended for the ship that never made it in. Partly due to time, partly due to budget. There was meant to be more. One of which was the harpoon system. This ship was actually meant to have some medium harpoon launchers mounted on a few points along the sides, partly for its exploration theme, like, you know, latch onto interesting things and help hold them against the ship, but also because of that whole Phorcys unstoppable, oncoming primordial doom from that you can't escape kind of thing as well. Just like latch onto the enemy and hold it at about a kilometer range, which will give the Phorcys more accurate and more chance to just pepper you with all of its shells and missiles and whatever it's throwing at you, basically. Next weapon system that was ditched, medium torpedoes were going to be installed. Ran out of, again, time and budget. But sadly, the Phorcys was reduced to just this underside torpedo launcher down here. Let's get it out of there. I'll also cover the this undersea section here, I guess, right now. So pause the game. So yeah, one big bank of kinetic. No, wait, sorry, not kinetic. They're kind of tipped because that makes them faster. But as you can see, these things actually pack a bit of a punch. They've got a mine magnet for when they get close, thump ahead. They are fairly fast at 72, and each individual missile does 1,900 HE. That is a fair chunk for a small missile like this, but it's pretty darn effective. If the enemy slows down, this thing will be peppering them from beneath the hull. Okay, just put the weapons away. Right, this entire section was like, it was intended to be a low-slung fin, like a single big fin, housing the medium torpedoes and the small torpedoes. There's meant to be a mixture. It was meant to be also like a single body, like down from this section here, rather than split into two. The fact that this is also using the ballast is actually an accident. I wasn't planning to, I was going to leave this empty. I put it on for looks and then thought, you know what, the craft has a bad rolling habit because it's top heavy. Like, it's got like a 25-degree roll at most in rough seas, so it's a bit unstable. But that is with that, and without that, it's like a 30-odd degree roll. So it can roll around quite a bit, unfortunately. But that's just like a side effect of its design. I would also like to note, by the way, these raised sections here, just scattered along. These are actually like additional buoyancy aids. I was wanting to do something to break up the underside because it was like one blank expanse of woods. But then I thought, you know what, let's add these little undersections here, just like these little pods. And that's actually done quite a bit to break up the linear nature of it. It looks like there's a lot more depth to it now. Even though these things are basically just like sectioned areas full of air. It's like a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit something else. But yeah, moving on. And note self, I don't have to cover that again. But yes, there was going to be more torpedo stations around the ship. I mentioned torpedoes to start out because I was going to extend the nose out a little bit and have like an underslung medium torpedo launcher at the front and on the top as well. So it's like the nose of the ship would have a couple of torpedo systems in it and that kind of thing. But as it is, the nose just houses a 360 camera, and then it is entirely, you know, not doing anything. I'll show you. So yeah, here we go. Look at how much stuff there is here. This is one of the sections which could be called blocks, and there's a little bit of metal in there because I decided I wanted to have the bracings in it. But as we go, it is entirely sectioned off into buoyancy containers, and that's it. So yeah. So as you can see, armouring does start to appear as we get a little bit further back into the actual sections of the ship. Like there's metal armoring appearing, there's heavier sections on the deck, which is reinforced wood combined with metal, and then the guns have a layer of metal around them as well, just for extra protection. But yeah, speaking of the guns, we are on the next area now, which is the forward cram battery. The cram battery was always intended as like a secondary means. They look big and impressive. They are 1500mm, but they were never really intended to be a major damage dealer, which is why they are basically. Let me shift P this thing. Get the internals out. There we go. As you can see, the cakes of these crams are actually really unimpressive. I did tinker with them to get them up to what I wanted. They were originally frag cannons as well, but during testing I switched them to HE just for more area damage rather than like pinpoint. But yeah, they are not very effective examples of such big looking crams because I kept the mechanisms deliberately small. So again, the ship doesn't really care about it if we lose some of these, but they do add a little bit while they're here, and they are probably the single biggest concentration of explosive damage on the ship, if I'm going to be entirely honest. Yes. But apart from that, this forward section has a couple of the anti-aircraft guns, and just doesn't do much else besides look pretty. That's basically what it does. I think there's an unfinished section here. No, I did round that out, but I didn't quite finish that bit. But yeah. It's also... I deliberately built it off-center, so this one's over here, this one's over here. Firing restrictions keep them from being a danger to anything else. And there's also... I used the space to tuck in a couple of extra missile pods on either side. So a couple of extra HE rocket batteries. And excellent things like that. I put some steps on there, but it seems I forgot to put in a way to actually get up there. Whoops. Oh well. It doesn't matter too much, but this entire section basically just houses the biggest cram cannons on the ship. Next design feature is actually going to be these things along here. In an effort to make the ship harder to disable, this is a distributed turning system. If you look there, ACBs, and ACBs, and ACBs, and ACBs, and ACBs. Every single part where there's a metal bit coming down here is actually its own individual turning rudder. And it covers, as you can see, like maybe the front third of the ship, roughly. And then there's another one at the back, which does the same, and of course it's the same on the other side too. The point of this is that if you want to actually stop this craft from being able to turn, you've got to basically blow up the waterline of the ship along over half of its length in total, and you've got to do that to both sides of it. So there's no single turning point, there's no massive rudder at the back, there's no dense banks of turning props at the front end and back end of it. It's just like you've got to destroy an entire section of it. I included that as an experiment, and honestly, it works okay. There is admittedly a couple of ACB flaws in the version that's been sent to tournament and the version here. Since this is the version I think I'm going to show in the workshop, if anyone wants it. So a few of the ACBs haven't actually been configured correctly, but it's an interesting system. Unfortunately, it does produce a lot of drag, and it requires a lot of calculations from your computer. So if your computer's not that strong, it's not a good system to go for, especially on a ship this size. It does make my computer struggle, but it will slow down a craft significantly when it's trying to turn full force, at the trade-off of making it very hard to stop it turning completely, unless you knock the AIs out. But yeah, just an interesting little feature, and also helps to break up, again, the linearity of the ship. So yes. One last note in this area is, notice the styling on these cram cannons. They are deliberately built this way. This one is like a split section. It's actually got ooh, that's for some reason stopped turning. That is actually meant on a spin block, so that's meant to be spinning, but for some reason it's not. I think an ATB overrode it at some point. Not sure why. Let me just what's going on with you? I need F9 up. Spin block continuous. Yeah, it's meant to be like spinning at like something like 4 or 5 a second or something like that. Yeah, that's right. 5 is what it's meant to be doing. For some reason it wasn't. But then I went with this one, and it's got this basically the same ones. They're slightly more powerful. They reel slightly faster, but they've got roughly the same power. But I decided to offset them to the side, so that I could build in this little control room on the edge of it, fully customized, that kind of thing. Somewhat reinforced so that the space is still counting towards protecting the actual cannons themselves. And then, as a additional curio, because like this thing's meant to be like Victorian steampunk, it's meant to be erratic in its design. It's meant to be like an oddball and just like experimental, doing its own things. There's actually an additional cram cannon here, which is built into the back of the turret housing itself. Again, I'll bring up the block arrangement so you can see. Look, this entire section here is like packed in at the back, and it pokes up over the top for an additional 1500mm cram. It's the weakest of them, but it still maintains roughly the same fire rates. But yeah, it contributes. It'll do something. And since it's mounted behind the others, it actually has, in terms of arm protection, it has the entire front section of this turret before it gets knocked out. So it's not completely unprotected where it's sitting. It's just like it'll probably last better than the 2 heavier crams, if I'm going to be honest. But it all depends on how and where the ship gets hit. Or in this case, where the turret gets hit, what it's going to do to it. But in all, this ship it doesn't care that much if it loses individual weapon systems. It's meant to be about sheer endurance. Oh no, you blew off a missile pod. Oh no, you blew off one of those small side guns. Oh no, you knocked out one of its cram turrets. It doesn't care. It's got more weapons. This craft often has more weapons. There you go. But yeah, moving on to that. These were some of the early designs. I wanted to continue this theme across the entire ship of customizing all the weapon systems, but I didn't. I ran out of time, so the other 3 cram cannons are these turrets. Again, 1500s, fairly powerful. They're packing like 11,500 HE damage on them, and they've got a bit of a slow reload time. Again, that's because of the general ineffectiveness of the crams, though the 2 heavier turrets do have faster firing times. But then it's just a copy-paste job on all the other crams because lack of time to customize them. I would have done it, but sadly I didn't get around to it. Oh well, c'est la vie. But yes, moving on. What was next? Was there something else I wanted to say here? No, I think, apart from the fact that yes, these crams are a bit vulnerable, but they do have some protection, and they are mounted on heavier bases, so they're not on the 1-piece bases, they're on the 3 pieces, so they're somewhat resistant to damage, but they don't contribute that much to the ship's overall firepower rating. Here, let me show you really quick. If I press V, I can find it. There was something about the firepower ratings. Yeah, look at this. Many light fittings. There are lights built into this as part of the decorations. Where was it? Oh, wait, here we go. Yeah, total firepower rating. 289.9. Armor is 37.8%, which is fairly reasonable for most ships. Missile performance figure 180. Crams 65. Even the simple cannon batteries are like 2/3 the strength of the cram turrets on it. And then there's the APS guns at 2.95, so yeah, the APS guns generally aren't much of a threat to any kind of ship. They're like an anti-aircraft gun. Against a ship they're going to do barely anything, in all honesty. But yeah, moving on. Crams. I know what I forgot. Since I'm here, I will mention these little APS guns now. There was meant to be a couple of brothers to these APS guns. These guys are just like access the intakes. How do I get to this? There we go. Yeah, that's just like 2 HE heads, an AP head, and then a lot of gunpowder for a faster travel time on it. So it's like, you know, pretty darn weak. It's only 60 explosive damage per hit, but it's meant to do things like knock out deadly blades, knock out wings, that kind of thing on enemy spotter planes. Sadly, most of the tournament craft don't actually have spotter craft with them, so who knows what they're going to do, but they are really cheap. They're only like 1,000 or so to place a single turret, so again, compared to the whole budget of 400k, not really worth worrying about. But yes, there were other systems. I was going to be bringing a version of the jackhammer turrets. You know, those Gatling railguns I designed. Some of you may know of them, some of you may not. But I was going to take the basic shell, and since I couldn't get a full-fledged railgun due to the APS restrictions for the tournament, I was going to get like some multi-barrel APSs and make some simple turrets and just scatter them around the ship, like all over the darn place. This thing was going to have a lot more guns on it, and they would combine to have the overall effect of several jackhammers. Like lots and lots and lots of small explosive shells flying everywhere. It would have been an impressive barrage to see, and it would have again gone with the whole theme of saturating the heck out of anything that is against the Phorcys, and damaging detectors and turrets more than anything else. So, you know, a lot of firepower. That was the intended effect. Anyway, moving on. I think this is a good point to mention the ablative armor, which lines the forward 2/3 of the ship, basically. But yeah, this is ablative armor. It's some of the decoration. Let's actually go ahead and get the cutaway mode going in again, because we are now in this section here, which is the forward part of the upper hull, the citadel. No, wait, that's called the castle, isn't it? The citadel would be the section underneath. But yes, the up-down cutter. Okay, so here we go. In the depths of the ship. This area has wood and metal layering for outer layers, and then it moves on to thicker metal in general around that area. As you can see, oh, this is metal wood because it's an empty storeroom, but here's some ammo storage, here's some AI, here's some more protected ammo storage, so again, varying protection. And as we go on, this is the other part of the citadel, split in half by this, which I will cover soon as we get to that area. There's the ammo control systems, here's the side bulkheads, there's more ammo and things here, so there's an additional bit of armouring going on in the sides here. But everything, as you can see, has got its own flotation compartments, its own protection where needed. There's a bit here where I forgot to install armour. So yeah, this is a slightly less protected section of metal. Whoops. I told you there was errors in this darn thing, so yeah, leave me alone. And then sadly, because I ran out of time, the back section of the ship doesn't actually have anything in it, aside from what was going to be an AI, but unfortunately I was required to take that out by the tournament organiser. So this is just a metal box just sitting in the middle of the area doing nothing, because there was no need for me to even do anything. But yeah, just keep on moving back. Again, more flotation areas. That's basically it. Right, let's move the cut up a little bit. No, that's the wrong cut. Oops. Yeah, moving on upwards. As you can see, there is a central access stairway going on here. The ladders, unfortunately, I didn't realise when I installed all the ladders, but they catapult your player model upwards. Instead of like you have to manually climb them, they just throw you upwards at high speed. It's a bit unfortunate that. I would have taken those out, but this is generally meant to be accessible. You can get into this entire section here. You can't actually get into this front bit here, but as you can see, like, the armour is continuing to rise as we go upwards and upwards. Now in the cram section, And there's the bit we want to talk about. Ta-da! Yeah. So as you can see, this area has got walkways in it, made out of reinforced wood, because it's meant to be like, sure, it's meant to be like, you can go around in it if you want to, you can walk around, but part of the design is that I didn't want it to be just simple wood, I wanted to have at least some protective value, so that's why there's a mixture of materials all over the place in this design. But this is the thing I wanted to draw attention to here, which is the ablative armor, aka the crew spaces. This is all mimic blocked up, and it's just like bunk bed with the ladders on, pillows, that kind of thing. There's even like little attachments at the ends here to the steam system, and there's one in the ceiling as well. But this is something I'm quite proud of, because I've never really tried to do much by way of mimic work before. And I put a quite fair bit of effort into just like getting this done and then moving it around the ship as needed. So this ship can actually carry a lot of people in true Victorian worker luxury. Basically you sleep in there, try to ignore the snoring, and then go out whenever you're not sleeping, so you don't stay there. I mean, look, there's even only like a single small locker bit for personal belongings, so yeah, true working class, yes. Though there was also these bits here. These were meant to house like some of the torpedoes or other weapon systems, just like a little bit here, which you can access by the walkways if you are so inclined. There's one over here as well. Offset slightly because, as you can see, the cram cannons are offset in that way as well. Ah dear. But yeah, the entire thing just like goes back, and there's nothing else of note really in this area because it's just more space. There's a couple of the secondary APS guns mounted in this area as well, just above the waterline. But yeah, that's about it, I think, for that section. Let's go ahead and take off the cuts again. Cutting off, thank you. Right, the upper bit though. There was meant to be like more internal spaces and rooms built into this area, but instead it just wound up with this single access point, which is one of the ways down into the below deck spaces. There's a couple of doors there, and then the stairs from this just like go down to those walkways I just showed you. So see, there is order to what I'm showing you. There is method to my madness and madness to my method. And I don't know what applies here or what doesn't, but I found this design pretty interesting nonetheless. So yeah, moving on.